Bit old.
Good evening to all of you, and welcome to this conversation, which marks it's actually the 32nd conversation, we've been having since 1994 on this day, 12th of September, which marks the anniversary of the Presidential Assent to the Prasar Bharati Act, 1990. But we won't be, of course, discussing the Prasar Bharati because we think it's it's virtually, a non-issue now because it's taken over fully and controlled by the government, and it's lost its autonomy. It's virtually so. We have in this interregnum we've been talking of state of the Indian media. So today we're going to discuss. Is journalism facing an existential crisis in the emerging Indian media ecosystem? We have a distinguished panel of journalists. We have Anant Nath, editor Caravan and president of the Editors Guild. We have Arati Jerath, political commentator and analyst. Then we have Shikha Mukerjee, who's a senior journalist who's joining us from Kolkata. And thank you, Shikha, for being with us. And then we have Nalini Mohanty, the former editor of the Hindustan Times, Patna. And yours truly, Suhas Borker, will be moderating the meeting. So what we'll do is we'll first of all have a kind of initial remarks by each panelist, say about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll go into a conversation mode. I think we all agree that there's an existential crisis, and then on the one end is journalism, on the other is this big ecosystem of the media, and they're not synonymous at all, because there's so many issues which come in. So we'll discuss all that, and then we'll open it to a Q&A, and then at the end, each panelist will get 2 minutes to give his or her closing remarks. So we shoot off. Anand, can you begin? Yeah.
Thank you, Suhasji. Is it on?
Yeah. No, you don't have to touch
Yeah.
that.
Okay, thank you. So I think most of us are very well aware the kind of challenges that media is facing, that press freedom is facing. And I like to just frame it around 3 or 4 axes around which the way I process the current problems that media is going through. First and foremost, a little bit more introspective in terms of ethics of media and how media has conducted itself, because very often we like to, sort of put the blame on somebody else, that, the state is, of course, being very intrusive. There is external factors which is affecting the way media is conducting itself, the way media gets to conduct itself, and of course, multiple other things, which is all true. But first and foremost, it's also important to look at the introspection, introspect on within our own conduct itself. And that becomes one defining parameter around which I feel we should frame, the state of Indian media ethics itself. The second being the business model of media. And most of these are, in my view, interlinked to each other because they sort of talk to each other. The business model, the way it is sort of shaped up in the last almost a decade, which itself creates certain constraints. The third being the legal framework within which media operates, because press freedom is, of course, intertwined with the freedom that our constitution gives, as well as the restriction that constitution allows governments to sort of put on true freedom of speech, and freedom of press is actually is within the larger freedom of speech that the Constitution allows, and how the legal framework has always been, and how it has developed in the last few years. And the fourth one being generally the environment of nationalism within which press is operating. And I'm going to sort of try and bring that within ethics itself. Um, I guess starting with the first and foremost is media's own conduct, because when we dial back 10 years ago, when the new dispensation took over, uh, and that is an inflection point within the way the environment within which press is operated. And I mean, it becomes one inflection point where we like to understand how the space for press freedom has evolved. And whilst we like to say, or it's convenient to say that a, a strong government, we are operating in an environment where the government has been visibly strong, where available laws have been used by the government, where even the business model, or the way government has used levers of control in terms of government advertising and so on and so forth. But at the same time, I think it's also important to know that how we have responded to that environment. And I think from 2014, it was very clear that there was a certain degree of self censorship that a large part of media had sort of put in place. Now, the reason why it's important to sort of foreground that is because we allowed ourselves to land into a position where uh, the government of the day has sort of taken advantage out of it. Had the press been far more resilient, had the press been far more proactive, and from the beginning itself, I don't think so. We would have sort of slid down, because it was very incremental. Whatever has happened is very incremental, in fact, and uh, it's a theory. I mean, it's an argument which is open for debate, that does censorship come or first, or self censorship come first? And I think in our context, the second one has allowed the censorship to come, because we know we've created an environment where we ourselves sort of put certain boundaries to what we could say. And I'm talking about largely the organized media here, because while the organized media has worked within a certain constraint, the independent media, of course, and especially the independent journalists, have taken on the battle. So my framing is mostly towards the organized and large media, because large parts of big media sort of put certain boundaries to what they could say, both out of fear and both out of economic reasons. It has allowed the government to sort of encroach into that space. And how it has done, of course, business model is first and foremost. Indian media has always been very dependent on government advertising. Uh, and as the last 10 years, the business model of media itself has shrunk. And we know that it's an open secret that uh, the sources of funding, the conventional sources of funding for most media have shrunk. Advertising has shrunk. People have shifted away from newspapers or whatever, television, to online. So the traditional source of revenue has shrunk. At the same time, government's own spending on media has increased every year. So every year, if you look at figures for the last many years, the one source of revenue that has increased every year is government's spending. This is at the central level. This is at the state level. In fact, one can argue that the state governments use this lever far more proactively than even the central government, because when you're in a certain state and you're running a newspaper, you're running a local TV channel, the amount of money that government spends in the media ecosystem is far more important and far more difficult to shy away from, given that your other sources of revenue has gone down, that it becomes almost impossible, no matter how well-meaning you may be, to sort of take an issue against that government. Take a state of UP. UP has been one of the largest spenders amongst any governments, and their share of their spending every year has gone up. Now, how do we expect a newspaper in a state of UP, or a local TV channel, to do any critical reporting of that state when they know that government advertising is the biggest single source? So again, this is something very obvious. I'm not saying anything new, by the way, here. and I don't think so any of us probably will say anything new, but it's just framing of the state where media has sort of landed itself. The business model being one, uh, the second being uh, a strain of nationalism as well. When the new government, in 2014 the government came, I think a large part of Indian media, especially in the northern, central, western India, ideologically was aligned to this, to the government's view. Now, when there is a certain ideological alignment that large sections of media, both at the ownership end and at the senior editorial leadership, sort of enjoys with the current dispensation, obviously, it sort of creates an inbuilt sort of, what you can say, resistance to any objective reporting. And nationalism and media has, by the way, gone hand in hand since time immemorial. In fact, one of my favorite philosophers, Benedict Anderson, actually, who coined the definition of nationalism as we know, nation as an imagined community. And his theory that for any kind of nationalism to take place, mass media ends up becoming an important vehicle, because it's the mass media that creates that imagined community of same people bound by a similar ideology. Uh, and so it's nothing new, for media and nationalism to go together, except in this case media has sort of become, and large parts of media, again, I'm saying, has become a sort of a collaborator with a certain nationalism project, with an active, involvement of newspapers, television channels, their ownership, their senior editorial leadership, which has again sort of created this inbuilt, in my view, I mean, again, I'm speaking from a very, a certain viewpoint, a certain deterrent for objective in reporting of the government, and many of, actually more often than not, cheerleading of the government. And we see that when the Ayodhya temple happened, we see that when Operation Sindoor happened, media had become a cheerleader rather than any kind of questioning of the government's narrative. The third framing for me is the legal environment within which media operates. Article 19(1) gives us freedom of speech. Article 19(2) also allows the governments to make laws under a certain set of exceptions. Those exceptions, which are 8 of them, are very broadly worded: national security, friendly relations with neighboring states, public order, morality. Now, this is a foundational problem, according to me, after looking at 80 years of history of the way laws have evolved. Because what has happened, what might have been thought of reasonable restrictions, and the intention was that that word reasonable will be used very judiciously and very conservatively. That might have been the intention, one can say. But in practice, those restrictions have been used very liberally, both in civil domain and in criminal domain. Laws have come up where any law that intersects with freedom of speech or speech per se has this provision that allows the government to initiate certain action on one of those 8 exceptions. It could be national security is the one which is used very often, public order, uh, decency, morality. All these are words that are used very liberally in both criminal laws and civil laws. Uh, if we look at the way criminal laws have been used to file FIRs against journalists for simple reporting, in the erstwhile IPC, there were sections called 153, hate speech, obscenity, and all those which were used. Enmity between two communities was a law that was very often used. Just a mere fact of reporting a certain ethnic violence between two communities could attract a complaint and an FIR that you are instigating further violence by just reporting that community A and community B are fighting, or maybe the first shot was fired by a community A against community B. As a result, what you're creating is, and you can't even report, because reporting itself has become an offense. Sedition was an offense which was there in previous IPC. Now the new BNS has come, that sedition, which was put under abeyance by the Supreme Court, has been reintroduced as treason. Misinformation has been made a crime into the new laws, which was never there in the previous laws. So the criminal system has been weaponized in such a manner that it can be used to file a complaint, and that complaint can be used to file an FIR, which allows some investigation to start. The conviction rate is in fact extremely small. It's in fact not even a, it's low single digit percentages. But the process itself becomes a punishment. It creates a chilling effect. Furthermore, in the civil domain, in the online space, a set of laws has been introduced where your account, your social media account can be taken down by the government. IT Act is there. Now IT rules, IT Act 2000 allowed certain provisions under emergency power for the IT ministry to take down certain content. Now IT rules 2021 have come, which further allow certain provisions for your entire channel to be taken down, for your website to be taken down, if your content is found violative of any of those 8 exceptions to freedom of speech. Who will decide in all of these cases? Who decides? Who's the first person who decides whether your content is criminally wrong or civil wrong? It is a government officer or it is a law enforcement agency. It's a police officer in the case of criminal laws. In the case of civil laws, either it's an IT ministry, it is MIB, or it is some other relevant ministry. The power is always with a government officer. And you can challenge it and get relief, but it's a process, and that process is both cumbersome, it is expensive, and for the time being, it has created a chilling effect. So this legal system, one has seen that the number of laws that were there, which would intersect with press freedom or freedom of speech, rather, I would say, has only become wider. In government was trying with a broadcast bill, which also allowed these kind of exceptions. So far, the broadcast bill has been sort of held in abeyance. But we are being told that, I mean, it can be introduced in any time soon. So I mean, I'm just going to keep it short now because I think I've overrun in time. That the legal system itself creates this chilling effect where as an independent journalist, you're not sure whether a objective piece of reporting will attract a certain civil or a certain criminal complaint, and you don't even know whether you will get speedy justice in the court of law. That itself is a different, larger story.
Thank you. Thank you, Anand. You calling about the chilling effect. Yesterday night, Anand got a call, and ostensibly it was a cop asking the details of this meeting. So then he told him that you please come, it's a public meeting, you're all welcome. So the cops are also with us, so they're most welcome to be with us. It's not, it's so they are most welcome if they are here. And you please take all the notes you can, because you must do your duty and we must do our duty. So anyway, so before I ask Shikha to come in from Kolkata, I mean, just a point to be noted that India now ranks 151 out of 180 in the 2025 World Press Freedom Index. Now, this index is itself questioned by the powers that be, but that's another story. So we won't go into that. Shikha, can you come on, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Suhas. And I think taking off from where, can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, we're perfectly audible. Please go ahead.
Thanks. So coming in from where Anand stopped, let me sort of say that there are two things here. One is that there is an existential crisis and there is an ecosystem, and the connection between the two is where the conflicts and the problems and the challenges for the journalists lie. But if we are thinking that that what is happening in national media is the only place where this challenge is evident, it is not so. It is happening right there on the ground at the regional level in ways which are pretty surprising. And that, I think, underplaying the impact of how the media environment, how the ecosystem has impacted the media, requires us to be far more alert to the ways in which the regional players, the regional media there have been attempts to control it, to intimidate it, and to obviously sort of amplify the messages that the authority wants to hear, and this is impacted on the independence of the media. It has also impacted on the quality of information that people are receiving at the level where it is vital to their life and livelihoods. And I think that is very important. If you look at the way in which, say, for instance, I live and work in Kolkata. It's not necessary that I actually work in the regional media. I don't. But having said that, let me say that I live and work in Kolkata, and what we have seen predates 2014. It predates the time that we think is a point of shift, a major paradigm shift sort of thing. That's not true. It has been happening at the level of the state. And that is where the first brunt of this shift is experienced. Let me sort of come in with the details. And then I'll come down to further details on how this existential crisis and the ecosystem combine together to create what we have today. In 2011, when there was a regime change in West Bengal, the CPM spectacularly lost, Mamata Banerjee spectacularly won. So this is a regime change, and the immediate impact of it was as follows. Orders were issued by the state government to withhold advertising. Orders were issued by the state government. There is also a different kind of messaging that was going through. Orders were issued to remove from the government's list of purchases certain newspapers and certain subscriptions to certain television channels. Now, this is a message to everyone who is a consumer that these are not the right guys. These are the wrong guys. And that was pretty sinister. And then you had the kind of choices that were being made more by what the regime thought were the right people to have on television panels for discussions, and the wrong people who should be kept out. And this is something that went on for a very long time. And then you have these verbal attacks by the chief minister, for one, describing journalists as Naxals, as people who are anti her personally, and a range of similar allegations, which tend to suggest to me that the root of the existential crisis and the ecosystem is deeply embedded within a very different kind of power relationship, which is now the dominant relationship that we have in India today. And this is not limited just to the center, it's not limited just to the states, it's probably there in every state that I know of, where there is an approved list and then there is the people who are not on the approved list. There is an approved list of channels and there is a list that nobody wants, the regime does not want to be approved. And why is this? Because the way in which power has been concentrated over a period of time within the Indian state. I mean, if you look at the way in which power itself has been centralized at one level, and then it has been concentrated. And then you have the personality cult or the politics of personalities. And then you have this kind of very personal in relationship between the leader and the public, which is mediated by the media. So the media, therefore, has to be controlled, because without that, the leader's messaging to the public is distorted.
What's happened?
But however that may be, there was a very serious control over how the messaging was being delivered to the public. This is exactly what is happening here today, and the control of the message is something that is being resisted. And I think that two things are happening at the same time. One, the cave-in, as it were, of the legacy media. And within the legacy media, I take print as well as television, because television is also a kind of sunset sector. And then you have there are two parts to this. One, the digital media, as it were. The digital media has two parts to it. One, which is independent, critical, and pursuing stories and providing platforms to people who want to take an independent view of what is happening within the country. They're raising issues which are not part of the mainstream media anyway. And then you have, and this is widely distributed. It's widely distributed because the major part of this digital media output is coming from regional languages. It's not coming from English. And Hindi is also not the only language in which this output is coming. It's coming from all kinds of languages. So, and then there is the other part of digital media, which is amplifying the dominant discourse. And the dominant discourse, Anant described it as nationalism. I would say it goes beyond just the nationalism part of it. It is the cult of the leader, the cult of worshipping the leader, which is a kind which you can call nationalism. You can call it the cult of the personality, but I think it also derives from the very fact, and this is where I think independent media has a problem in India. It has a real existential crisis. Is that it is based. We as a civilization are very patriarchal, and therefore patriarchy automatically teaches us. It's a default position for most of us that we automatically align ourselves with whatever is the dominant order, the dominant discourse. And this alignment, this kind of patriarchal civilization within which we are functioning, means that neither differences of opinion, nor dissent, nor defiance is an acceptable way of doing anything. Journalism being one of the areas that we are talking about. And I think I'll just end it here.
Yeah. Thank you, Shikha. We'll come again. Now I'll ask Arati to take the floor.
Thank you, Suhas, for calling me to this discussion, which I think is very, very important in today's times. While agreeing with most of what Anant and Shikha said, I'd like to go back to way before 2014, because I think this crisis has been in the making for several decades. I joined journalism in 1980, just after the emergency, but about 3 years after the emergency had been lifted, and journalists sort of, broke free of the yoke of censorship. And we saw this, sort of huge, pushback by the media against the kind of restraints that were put on them during the emergency. And we saw the growth of investigative journalism, human interest stories. I was working for the Indian Express, Arun Shore leading the charge. If you remember all the wonderful stories that were done at that time, the conditions in jail when, one of our reporters got himself arrested and spent 2 nights in jail, the Bhagalpur blindings, the story of Kamla, the woman who was sold and bought again by one of our reporters to highlight the kind of trafficking that goes on. Those were really the glory days of journalism. And I think, the Indian Express showed the way, but I think a lot of newspapers followed that course very much. And, we had magazines that came up. They were also doing these kind of stories. The unfortunate thing is it did not last very long because at some point in the late 80s, early 90s, proprietors realized that, there was money to be made out of newspapers. Earlier, newspapers were never seen as a money-making machine. They were, much like education, healthcare. These were kind of services that were provided for people, for society, and not really, looking at corporate turnovers. But suddenly they realized that there was actually, you could turn this into a money making machine. And that's when the entire business model of the media changed. They started talking about newspapers being like news, being like soap, a commodity to be sold. Started talking about, sort of square inch space on the news pages, and how much is this real estate worth, how much are we going to devote to news. There was one newspaper I remember that even tried to downgrade the editorial page. In fact, it almost disappeared it altogether, till I think it realized that it just wasn't done, so it brought it back. But instead of the edit page being in the center of the paper, it was placed almost towards the end of the paper, as if it's not important anymore. So, once you start seeing news as money and you start thinking of it as a commodity like soap to be sold, obviously you are devaluing journalism. And journalism stops to mean what it was, which is basically, holding up a mirror to society, to the government, and informing people of not just what's right, but also what is wrong. Because that, I think, is a key role of the media. You may call it negative, but if the media does not point out what is wrong, how is any government or how are people going to know what we need to address and what we need to set right? So once you start thinking of it like that, then, news doesn't matter. And who cares? You're looking at the, sort of guy on the road. You're talking about how I only want to see happy news on the front pages. I don't want to see, sad news on the front pages. You don't want this kind of, hard-hitting journalism which takes on the powers that be. It's a very short step, very small step to being controlled by governments. And it didn't take very long, really, for governments to realize that in this chase for money, it became easy for them to start controlling the media. And so, and I mean, while maybe as journalists we could have tried to stop this trend, I don't know. It's very difficult to stand up to proprietors when proprietors are, sort of bringing advertising guys into the newsroom and telling you, what sort of news should be carried. They would come in and say, yesterday's headline was not good. We cannot attract advertisers if we put headlines like that. Then the whole thing of journalism vanishes completely. And, and as a journalist, it becomes very difficult to fight that tide because, it's being driven right from the top, from the guy who pays your salary. So, obviously, there was a time when politicians or governments used to operate through editors. Then politicians and governments realized that they can actually operate through proprietors. They don't need journalists anymore. So journalists became, kind of like, sort of handmaidens in the entire operation. They weren't important anymore. And, the dictates came from the top. So this crisis that we're seeing today has actually been in the making for the last 3, 4 decades. And of course, it just took a very clever, canny government like the present one to, kind of find all the loopholes and twist them, use them, get in to control the media, to sell its own narrative to the extent that today that is the only narrative that you are seeing in newspapers, that you are seeing on television channels, the kind of agenda-driven discussions we see every evening. And it's very sad because I think the media has lost a lot of respect in, amongst common people. Today, you hear people actually tell you, "Arey, media to big gaya hai." All you journalists, we don't believe you anymore. And yet, they continue to buy newspapers and they continue to watch television channels. So it's a very funny kind of love-hate relationship that we see between, the public and the media. But I mean, to some extent, can we just blame the media alone for the crisis today? I mean, I think the crisis in the media reflects the all round crisis in democracy. I mean, it's every institution seems to be compromising and collapsing. Judiciary, the election commission. Look at what has happened with the election commission today, the kind of questions that are being raised. So I mean, if parliament, if the executive, if the judiciary, the three main pillars can compromise themselves to suit one dominant narrative which is being spun by the regime of the day. I mean, where does the media really stand in this? Although the media should stand apart and should stand above it all, but it's very difficult. And you have the ED and you have the CBI. And I remember there was this one newspaper, I mean, I think COVID really highlights how how much the media has kind of collapsed in doing its duty because, very few newspapers actually covered the extent to which COVID had, the kind of deaths that were happening, the, terrible state of hospitals and all. And it was really left to the small digital channels and the independent media, the YouTubers. They were the ones who were doing all the, reportage, often at peril to themselves. I remember there was this guy in UP who I think was the first one to post pictures on his on YouTube of the bodies that were being washed ashore from the Ganges, and he got arrested. I mean, ultimately released, but he did get arrested at that time because he showed this. He dared to show it. And then there was this newspaper in Gujarat which published this absolutely stunningly horrifying picture of the funeral pyres burning at night, in a huge Maidan somewhere in Ahmedabad. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of funeral pyres. Within 2 weeks, the offices of that, newspaper were raided. And I don't know, cases were filed, and I don't know what happened to them eventually. But it's so easy, because there are enough weapons available to a government that wants to utilize them utilize them the way they want to utilize them. So it's a crisis all around. I would say that, I mean, much as one would like to lament and feel very sad about what's happening today and, all that, but I mean, you do find a little hope because technology has given us an alternative kind of media to the legacy media, which is, now fallen on such bad days. And technology has opened up. You have independent news websites, you have, YouTubers, you have podcasts. And I find increasingly, like when I walk on the roads of my colony, and I listen to, I just look around at all the security guards who are sitting. All of them are glued to their mobile phones and they're all listening to news that is coming to them from independent channels, not from the legacy channels, but from independent channels. So, that's really where the future is. It's unfortunate. It's not yet organized. It's not institutionalized. And they do have a problem of funding because who's going to pay the money for, to do this? But I mean, I think this is still to find its feet. We're in a changing world, a rapidly changing world. And let's see where it goes from here.
Thank you, Arti. I think it's, you said the media has lost respect. I think it's lost trust, It's, it's,
told कि media तो बिका हुआ है.
So now I'll request Nalini to come in. Just a little peg for your intervention that journalism now has lost totally its vocation of public service. Do you think so? It's all, I mean, with the Adanis and Ambanis coming in, I mean, they're not bothered about public service at all. So they are into monetization of the word, Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, Suhas, Anand, Shikha, Arati, they have set the context for today's discussion. To me, the real question today is this. Is the legacy media pursuing journalism per se? Journalism in the sense of being the fourth estate? Or has the classical journalism lost its mojo? To put it in different words, is fearless journalism facing an existential crisis in the Indian media? To this question, my unequivocal answer would be yes. Fearless journalism, as we know it, is dying today in the traditional media, both in print and in television. You don't have to delve deep to establish that the media ecosystem in India had changed irretrievably in the last decade or so. Just churn the newspapers, surf the television channels, you'll find telltale evidence that the Indian media has become servile to the political establishment. Just look at the newspapers yesterday. Almost every national daily carried in its edit page Prime Minister Modi's sycophantic tribute to Mohan Bharbat, the RSS chief, on his 75th birthday. What was it all about? Prime Minister Modi had barred his leaders, Murli Manohar Joshi and Advani, from being members of parliament, saying, "You have reached the milestone 75, now allow the youngsters to join." Now he's approaching 75. Another 5 or 6 days, he would become 75. And that's the reason he wants to save his position. It's a situation where his party men are spineless. They can't force him to stick to his own rule and step aside. So, only the RSS can force his hand. And that's why Prime Minister Modi is going around as a supplicant in Mohan Bharbat's darbar, seeking mercy from the RSS so that he continues in his position. Well, I don't mind. No one will mind if Narendra Modi goes to RSS office and prostrates before Bharbat, Mohan Bharbat. But when Indians' national media are being used for Prime Minister's personal agenda of self-preservation, that's a sad reflection on our media ecosystem. This shows the real state of Indian media. Modi, the master, and the media, the helots. Well, I may be putting these things bluntly, but this can be put in more respectable words, of course. In fact, the other day, in this very building below in the multipurpose hall, there was a discussion in which Uday Shankar, the high priest of India's television, put it very, very candidly, rather respectfully. And I think he was speaking on a subject similar today. I think Anant Nath, Editors Guild of India, had organized that function. And in fact, Anant was in the chair and Uday was the main speaker. And Uday didn't mince words. He proclaimed that journalism as we know it is dead. A new kind of journalism is taking shape. In this new avatar, only those journalists who choose to become the stakeholders in the business of news dissemination will survive and prosper. Those who do not contribute to a healthy bottom line, they will fall by the wayside. Uday was right. Today, if someone thinks his or her job as a journalist is to speak truth to power, they would be run down as activists, not as journalists. In this worldview, speaking truth to power is activism. Being a power broker is journalism. So you have the best credentials to land a job in print or television in the mainstream media today if you have the skills of being a good stenographer. A good stenographer is one who takes note of the leader and reproduces them faithfully. You can claim better paycheck if you have the ability not just to echo, but also to amplify the voice of the political master. But if you try to be buffer, as a true journalist ought to be, if you expose the internal contradictions of the leader's position, if you point to the variance between the leader's words and deeds, then journalism is not the right profession for you in today's media ecosystem. Binit Jain, the managing director of Times Group, famously said, "We are not in the news business. We are in the advertising business. More than 90% of my revenue comes from the advertisement, and that's why more than 90% of my attention and resources is devoted to promoting my advertising business. News business is just a sideshow for him." The implication is clear. Advertisers have the final say as to what would constitute news. Any news that offends the advertisers or goes against the interest of the advertisers will have no place in the media industry. And who are the big advertisers? It's the government and the corporate houses. So the news that shows government and its leader in bad light will not have no place. News that exposes the ugly shenanigans of the corporate media houses can have no place in the national media. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, the BJP leader and the media tycoon, who had co-founded the Republic group of television channels with Arnab Goswami, had no qualms in proclaiming that his only mandate to the editors was this: you must get the lion's share of the TV viewership and TV business market. How do you do it is your business. He is a BJP leader, so pandering to the saffron establishment was a given. But that was only a small part of the power play. In fact, the bigger challenge was how you project loyalty to Prime Minister Modi as loyalty to the nation. So the mandate was, show PM Modi as patriotism personified. Increase your viewership by invoking patriotism at every step. Arnab Goswami, as the able editor-in-chief of the channel, was the architect of the brand of journalism, which said, to increase eyeballs, If you need to spread lies, if you need to sensationalize, if you need to promote hate speech, so be it. In this scheme of things, means are not important. The end result is. Whatever illegality you may do, be assured that if you are on the right side of power, then long arm of the law will not reach you. Even the Supreme Court of India will call an emergency sit-in to grant bail to someone like Arnab Goswami on a holiday because he is a high-profile cheerleader of the establishment. Whereas the same Supreme Court will have no time for years to listen to the pleas of a journalist like Siddiqui Kappan, as his journalism seeks to expose the ruling establishment. So we are standing at a juncture where well-known media empires have hit the final nails in the coffin of the classical notion of journalism. What we knew as responsible or legitimate journalism has ceased to exist. News that sells and news that brings in money has become the mainstay of the media business. But then, good journalism does not always die just because of the greed of the entrepreneurs of media business seeking to maximize benefit by all means. Sometimes their hands are forced by authoritarian government which doesn't take kindly to any kind of criticism. Take the case of our own Modi government. The regime weaponized the state machinery against any media house that showed any semblance of independence. You can see the example of NDTV. That was one TV channel which had the gumption to do a few critical reports about the government. The regime struck back, unless in the ED, CBI income tax against the owners Pranay Roy and Radhika Roy. The government made the NDTV operation unviable. And that's why Roys were forced to sell the channel to Prime Minister Modi's closest corporate house, Adani's. And see, soon after the transfers were completed, soon after Adani's became owner of NDTV, all the investigative agencies submitted closer report regarding cases against Pranay Roy and Radhika Roy, saying they did not find anything to implicate both. What did it show? It shows independent message to independent media. If you don't buckle under pressure, then you will be thrown out of your business. So what are these media houses doing today to maintain a semblance of credibility? They sometimes, of course, show some criticism of one government policy or another. But when it comes to Prime Minister Modi personally, they turn toadies. Even when Prime Minister Modi made those diabolical hate speeches during the election rallies, hate speeches that befitted the street ruffians of his own party, no media house dared to haul him over the coals. That's the sad testimonial of the character of the legacy media today. So, we are at the crossroads. As far as the traditional media goes, journalism, as you knew, is on the deathbed. But does that mean journalism, as you knew it, responsible or critical journalism is passing? The answer is no. Critical journalism is still there, only its locus has shifted. It has shifted from the traditional media to the new media, to a host of websites, YouTube channels, and other different forms of social media. We can see very much that in that digital space, true journalism is alive and kicking. Well, the digital media is not all anti-establishment. It's polarized right in the middle, with a strong network of pro-RSS, pro-BJP, and pro-Modi platforms, competing with the truth seekers who show the mirror to the government on a daily basis. So the battle lines are clearly drawn. The internet Hindus, the crusaders for Hindu India and blind followers of Modi dispensation are hell-bent on converting the secular India into a communal majoritarian state by using the digital space as their propaganda arm. But India remains a secular and democratic state only because there is a substantial section in the digital media which is relentlessly exposing the falsehood of the government and bringing truth to the light. This section constitutes the bulwark of resistance against an authoritarian and communal regime. And we can proudly say that those digital journalists are the true saviors of our democracy.
Thanks, Nalini. Today in the morning, we lost a close associate, Professor Jagdish Chokar, an outstanding champion of transparency in public life and electoral and political reforms in the country. We'd like to, if you could just rise in 2 minutes silence in his memory. Please take your seat. To the last breath, he was fighting his cases on in the Supreme Court on this, the electoral problems in business and everything. Thank you. Now we'll do you have mics? Do you have mic, Lan? A lot of questions rise. This probably you would like to speak on something on the patriarchal aspect. No, yeah, please. Yeah, the mic.
Now, I just want to say that I'm glad that both Arati and Shikha put their finger on saying that this is not the inflection point, the last decade, but that their problem has been a problem in the making for several decades. And I think that's very important to recognize. Because if we go on talking about 2014, which is valid, but that's only one aspect of what has gone wrong. And as someone who's been in the media, I came in 1957, so it's been a long, long innings of losing a lot of people. What I want to say is two things. One, I want to put my finger on that the turning point really came in the early 90s. We all welcomed that fantastic judgment which opened the skies. But in that euphoria of seeing that the open skies were public spaces, we did not pursue what was also a very vital part of the judgment, that rules and regulations have to be brought in. And we allowed, therefore, those of us in the media kept quiet by and large, and therefore we allowed the corporate sector to come in a free flow. And the media has always had to be, in order to do what we think it should be doing, equidistance from both the government and the corporate sector. Now we've had the worst of both worlds because the corporate sector has not allowed those rules and regulations that could have come in at that point to come, because every time something is raised, there is a hoo-ha. And I have witnessed many broadcasting bills being made and remaining in the drafting stage, never getting passed, and the situation going from bad to worse. So And therefore, you now have these two poles. On one side, the government, on the other side, the corporate, and the journalist, the media person, squeezed in between. And that's my other point, that what has happened is the Journalist Wage Act was thrown out of the window. You have contractual appointments, and you're asking men and women who have lives to lead, families to feed, to be the stalwarts when they have absolutely no security. But that is something that nobody has fought for, or if they have fought, the voice has been very feeble. And the last point I want to make on this is that I witnessed, we're talking today about kowtowing because media has become business. Of course, it has become not only business, become one of the biggest businesses that there is in the country now, industry, not business, but industry that is in the country. And so the stakes are very high. But what I do want to bring out is that the stakes always were high, even when the media was a mission, because you did have, even in the old days, the Birlas ruling the Hindustan Times, the Jains of the Times of India. These were all sahukars. They were not missionaries. But you also had men like Mulgaonkar. I think very few people know, but I would like to bring to the table two what should I say, not anecdotes, but pieces of evidence of the kind of person that you needed to helm to stand up to corporate interests, business interests. Mulgaonkar, for one thing, I mean, he's famous for the fact that the Jeep scandal, standing up to Nehru, ensuring T.T. Karmachari was dismissed as the finance minister. So in those times, bringing out those. And the other, much more personal story, there was naturally, just as there is today, there was scurrilous reporting around him because he was too proud and too independent, and therefore he had to be brought down. And somebody filed a case in the court to say that he was of illegitimate birth. And the entire media said, this is not to be published. But Mulgaonkar ensured that the Hindustan Times ran that story. He said, this is not something to be suppressed just because I happen to be in a position here to say so. So you had people like that, which unfortunately, and that's my final thing, that you eliminated the editor altogether.
Yeah, so may I, sort of add to what you're saying? It is true that, say, a paper like the Hindustan Times was run by a corporate house. A paper like the Times of India was also, I mean, the Jains were, after all, in business. But, there was always a wall dividing the proprietor and the editors, the journalist staff. And the proprietor never interfered. He
That's not true, Arati.
And witness.
Well, I mean, compared to the kind of
let me tell you,
No, that's not true.
I've known many editors and many stories that were shared of an evening of how Birlaji would ask somebody something and what has to be done, or the Jains talking. There was no wall. The wall was the man, and unfortunately, never a woman, but at that point of time. But the wall was the man himself.
That's right.
George Verghese.
Yes, but that's what.
On the
Staircase. But they
I think the point taken.
But they hired men like that, and they tolerated them. They gave them the space.
My final point is that you also have not the Journalist Wage Act, you no longer have editors. I remember I mean, you know,
I think
no, I'm sorry. There are present exceptions there, but I'm talking of large newspapers.
They don't want editors like
I remember at one point, I needed something in the Times of India, and I said,
I think
I went to somebody and I said, would you tell me who is the editor of the Times of India? And he said, I am. So it was, I knew the person well, but you didn't even know that he was the editor.
Thank you.
This is the kind of situation to which the editor's position has been brought in. So where can there be a wall?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. There, just pass them. Yeah, sure.
My name is Ajay Singh. I'm from the Indian Maritime Foundation. I'm not a journalist. I have all respect for the media. But I think in today's arguments which have been put forth, I think have been absolutely spot on. Excellent presentations, obviously, from stalwarts in the field. But I think we have to, at least to a layperson who's exposed to the media, I read newspapers, I do watch television also. I think we have to now make the distinction between print media and electronic media as well. Because if anything is doing damage to the credibility of journalism today, I'm sorry, I don't know how many people are here from the electronic media, is the electronic media far more than the print media. I read the newspapers so that I get some objective understanding of what's happening. And I do not watch the news because I do not get that objective understanding from there. So I think we have to make that division also. And I'll give you a small example. Recently, there was an article published. I work for a company which deals with certain equipment, which did not quite give the correct picture on the electronic version of that particular magazine. So we spoke to the editor. And he said, electronic is, it's got to be fastest finger first kind of a thing. So it was done very quickly. We don't have time to do that kind of due diligence before we sort of go ahead with these stories. But what will come in the print media will be properly researched and then analyzed and then printed. So this kind of thing, my family.
Fine.
So it's that kind. What I'm trying to say is we have to make this distinction between the two.
Fine.
Where is the credibility getting actually damaged?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, give the mic.
Thank you. I think there's much to reflect upon, but as I can get the sense from the presentations, I think it's become more of a systemic issue, not just a particular segment of the system. My question basically is twofold. One is that we're talking about the electronic media, the TV channels and the print media. Now you have the artificial intelligence, and you find you can produce a newspaper by artificial intelligence. We can run a channel by having these avatars, so to say, reading out the news. So you're now moving into a very different kind of a spectrum as to how news is to be disseminated and propagated. That's my first point. The second thing is, and it's a question really, the second thing is that, you are practicing journalists. My question really is that, there's no monopoly of political power anywhere, certainly not in India. I mean, if you read closely between the lines, you can see what's actually happening practically everywhere. My question really is this, that as practicing journalists working at the grassroots level, at getting the sense of the public, how does political change occur, when things just get turned around, get out of hand? And that also actually is a battle of narratives. So my question really is that how can, that trend, including artificial intelligence and whatever else you have, social media and whatever, how can that trend become a little more systematic, where you actually look at the larger issues which the country is facing? Thank you.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, get the mic. Get the mic is there.
My name is Sanjay Narayan. I was with the government earlier. One observation, the lady, I'm sorry, I don't know her name. Chavla. She mentioned a lot of stalwarts who were there during probably her slightly younger days. And what I would like to state is that we have stalwarts today who are as great and as big. We look to all the YouTube and other channels to seek out the truth. And one of the main factors for journalism is, where do you get truth? And we seek the truth on these channels. The second is a question to Anant. How long do you think the print media will last? Not only because of the tirade against it, but also because of the social media trends, the digital media.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Just Oh, see, my question is, you have all highlighted very well the status of current media and the problems being faced. My name is Anil. So, but then nobody has commented upon what are the solutions? How do you come out of this? See, proprietors will always be there. Somebody will own the business and they will like to earn money. So, what are the currently solutions available to this?
Yeah, good.
Actually, that's the question I wanted to ask. Because, I mean, we're all there, we've heard this, and you're quite right. It's RIP, RIP for the media. Especially
Journalism for women. Yeah.
media per se.
No,
journalism.
it's not synonymous. Huh?
Okay,
That's what the point
for
is.
the journalists. So and especially because Anant is here also. Caravan is one magazine which is showing the mirror standing up to the government. At the same time, you're heading an organization which was really had, as Rami Aunty said, that, the stalwarts. So you're talking about the EGI. I still remember, I'm a trade union activist, and we went on the streets of Rajpath against the Bihar Press Bill. What is the solution? What can we do as a community to safeguard what can we do and what should we do?
I think that's quite a... Yeah, go ahead.
So let me just answer a couple of questions to begin with. The solution ahead. I think the solution is very simply, in my view, to fight. I think we have to find the ways to fight. Often, we underestimate the power of collective action, and I'm speaking from Guild's own perspective. Last few years, certain laws were being introduced, which not just Guild but various other media bodies, rights-based bodies, took a very proactive step, often using judicial forum. So I think one of the most important forums to use is the judicial forum. And while there is a lot of debate on efficacy of judiciary, and these are legitimate questions, at the same time, the same forum does end up restoring our rights. And I think we have to keep on taking our chances. We have to organize ourselves, all press bodies, all individuals, organizations, bodies who do strongly feel for the state of media, states of democratic rights. We need to keep on organizing ourselves, and we would probably end up being better off than we would have been had we not fought. And that, I think, is a certain solution. The two examples that I can cite is when the government introduced the fact-checking unit, which was actually a censorship unit. It was not fact-checking unit, it was a censorship unit, because the idea was that any news or any piece of information regarding the central government, if in their view was false, fake, misleading, very, very, very broad words, then they can take it down. The Guild, many other organizations approached the court. We were able to get it unconstitutional. The sedition law was actually held or was put in under abeyance by the Supreme Court in the IPC. It's found its way back. We have to fight it again. The broadcast bill was put into abeyance. In fact, there was almost introducing in the parliament, but the government sort of, for whatever reason, whether it was a tactical move, whether they want to reintroduce it again, we don't know. But for the time being, it has been taken back. So you do end up restoring or preserving the space. In fact, even the new Data Act, which has been introduced, has some provisions that can take away certain rights. The government has actually been, engaging with us. I must say, credit due wherever it should be due. The government has been engaging with us, with Press Club of India, in at least finding a way to listen to us. So not all hope is lost. The solutions is to keep on restoring that faith by collective actions. The other question that Mr. Narayan asked was future of print. That's a very tough one to answer. Again, a very, it's the answer that is emerging is maybe print may not survive at the same level it was in terms of scale and in terms of widespread reach. But to imagine a world where there will be no physical, edition of either a newspaper or a magazine is also not going to be there, because at the end of the day, the same story that has repeated itself in cinema, in, where one would have thought that OTT will sort of kill theater, but people want a cinematic experience. The same story that repeats itself with music, where people would say that just because you have music on your phone, people will not go to a live concert. But yet you see live concerts being bigger than ever before. There is a certain human craving for a physical world. And newspapers and magazines, I feel I'm not being a romantic here, I'm not being even a utopian, I'm being very practical, that enough people would end up wanting a physical manifestation of a newspaper and a magazine, and that's from a physical point of view. And again, the data from book sales, by the way, is also very encouraging. Book sales from at least the American market, let's say we take, book sales had gone down, they are now going up again. Books chains had shut down, bookstores are shut down, now they are going back up again. Probably they will not reach the same level that they were in late 90s, early 2000s, but much better than what we were imagined. So that's the physical part. The second is print as a metaphor. And that's a question that Sir had raised, AI generated. I think very often, I mean, these facts come, AI is there. Of course, it will flood the digital ecosystem with a lot of content, but very soon people are also very smart. We do want content that is produced with a certain human intelligence, both in terms of investigation, emotion, curation, and so on and so forth. Whatever, adjectives you can think of, people want content that has got a human element to it. It will come back. It will find a space. It will coexist with a lot of AI-driven, a lot of other kind of driven content, but that human intervention will be needed, and that's where print as a metaphor, where content is produced with original reporting, with somebody going out on the field, meeting people, doing original research, it being edited by a person who brings their own sensibilities, investigative, emotional, attitudinal, and putting out a content that resonates at a very, very fundamental level will always remain, and we can't take away with that no matter what. So the equilibrium will be found sooner or later.
Sabina, can I just
Look,
say?
we just ask Shikha to come.
Oh, yeah, sure. Okay.
Shikha,
Yeah. Well, for one, I have to confess this. I do subscribe to the print, but I read a hell of a lot of the print on my computer screen. So I understand that the print as a physical format needs to survive, but we also need to reflect on the fact that what Indian newspapers are doing in terms of trying to corner the sort of internet or the digital space by putting out online editions, that quality needs to improve hugely in order for it to survive, even as a credible source of information, even as a sort of vaguely credible source of information. The kind of shortchanging that goes on is pretty disgusting. Number one. Now, the second thing is that, if you look at the number, we have 1.1 billion at the last count that I saw of mobile phones. People are reading, people are consuming information, people are consuming entertainment on their smartphones. So it is obvious that whether the legacy media or the corporates or whoever it is does not take into account that people are showing a distinct preference for a particular way of consuming news and a particular way of consuming information, then I think they're going to get it wrong. And the print surviving or print not surviving is a kind of nostalgia. But what is important is there a demand for information? Is there a demand for news? And is there a demand for the kind of news that makes all of us sit up and say, yes, there is independent journalism, there is critical journalism, there is investigative journalism, which challenges the narrative or the sort of authoritarian model of top-down information, which has become now the dominant factor. And in this space, what we are seeing is the emergence of celebrities created by the digital platforms, the digital channels, the sort of celeb, one of the things that has happened in the last 10, 15 years, 15 years actually, more, about that time, is the emergence of these celebrity journalists, people who have this instant recognition. People like to be photographed with them. People like to think that, they are celebrities in their own rights, that they're not necessarily only journalists. Now, the digital platform is creating these heroes as well. And I think it's important that we recognize that there is a kind of shift in consumer choice, which is going to lead the way in which the media is going to be shaped in the future. And if you look at the other countries, I mean, let's be very clear. I mean, if you look at how other people are consuming in the other parts of the world, information and news, they are shifting away from mainstream, because mainstream is not giving them the kind of information or the quality of information that people want. And I really don't understand why we are fixated about there being only one kind of journalist, which is journalists who work in the legacy media. There are these other journalists, they're doing a courageous job. And yes, their survival is shaky, but they're getting there. And I think that this is going to the speed at which this is going to accelerate is something that is going to shock everybody.
Okay, fine. We'll come back. Aarti, you had a point?
No, actually, I think Shikha has put it very well, because that's the point I was going to make, that ultimately, it is the reader or the viewer who will decide where journalism is going to go. And if readers, like say, for instance, in the print media, if readers push back either by stopping their subscription to a newspaper, or by flooding the newspaper with letters to the editor complaining about the kind of coverage that they read every day, I think that the message needs to be given to the proprietors that this is not what the public wants. And we are seeing it. I mean, I'm told that, DTH subscriptions to electronic channels is coming down, drastically coming down, because people are shifting away from these channels and they're moving to YouTube channels now. Their viewership is going up. I mean, if you look at, say, a person like Ravish Kumar, he has more than 1 million subscribers for his channel. So, and ultimately it's the public that will decide. And if the public speaks up, if the public pushes back, I think journalism, will have to maybe change to adapt to the new, sort of environment that we're in. But journalism can survive in a different way, not what it was 40 years ago, because all of us change, right? And change is really the way to go.
Yeah.
But journalism can survive.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I have 2 or 3
give my
points.
Yeah, sure.
As somebody who teaches history of media, I have been witnessing this as in a historical context, where there's a battle going on in India between print, to which Anand had referred to Benedict Anderson, because print is reflective. It helps you reflect and create communities of shared interest. And Indian nation, for that matter, is a product of the print. And there is this oral, audiovisual, whatever you call it. So the hard work versus Harvard is a kind of metaphor that was used for bullying this oral audiovisual against print. So that is one point. This contradiction is going on. There's a big fight within the universities, within the institution. You can see that the libraries are bereft of books now, print books, because everyone is one nation, one subscription, digital. So that battle is on, very intensely on. Within the students, you can see one set of students are for print, one for oral, and you can also see their location, ideological location, political location also become very real. So that is one. The second is, I recently traveled 2 years back. I traveled across 6 countries in the Eastern and Central Europe, which had just one newspaper for 40, 45 years, or two newspapers controlled. We are talking today of being controlled, but our future was their past. But when they came out, it is the print which has brought them out. And even 2 years back, on the Ukraine war, it is an article by Habermas on the importance of having peace that created the buzz, created the debate, created the reflective debate about the audience. So print, therefore, retains its position. And it is not that all is lost, because in this battle of reflection versus mobilization, digital and oral is mobilizing, print is even today giving the space for reflection. I think this battle will go on. Which side it go on, we don't know, but everywhere the mobilization is through Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. Mobilization is through oral, audio, visual, electronic, digital. But finally, people are coming back to print to have a reflective judgment, reflective understanding, reflective shared community. This is what the kind of understanding that I'm getting from a sense of history.
Yeah.
My name is Dr. Raghuvansh. I've had the opportunity and privilege of having worked in media for 25 years in different kind of media. I worked in a trust-run newspaper like Tribune, PTI, which is for the journalist, by the journalist, of the journalist, and also in Hindustan Times, of which we were talking about. So I have one perspective I would like to give, that, someone said that this degradation that we see is not only post 2014 phenomena. And I'll just give you an example. Political masters pushing back and putting journalists under pressure is a very old thing. Even during the UPA time, there was not a single day if a news item in PTI we would give about Chidambaram, he would not ring up in the morning. Why did you put this quote I did not say, and this word I didn't use? So journalists have always been put under thing. What is the difference is that when you have editors who will say, okay, you just say that I passed that story. That is missing today. Editors standing for junior or middle level journalists. And so today there is a very big gap between junior journalists who do all the legwork and senior journalists, who are balancing their career, but they're not ready to defend the junior journalists. That is the point.
Nalini, would you like to come?
The question of print, I think the debate about the existence of print is more in the West. That's been happening for quite some years, and because a large number of retrenchment happened in the major media houses. And I think some of these today, the New York Times stands out as one example which is holding forth, but Washington Post is in crisis. And that's why Washington Post, Bezos went to seek mercy from Donald Trump, because otherwise in the first term he was defiant, but in the second term he knows that if Donald Trump goes against him, his business empire will collapse. So that's why in West it's a major crisis. But I think in India, our media houses have cracked the profit code, and our business is doing very well. Times of India Group is making, I think, about 3,000 crore profit, and Jagran, and all of them are making so big profits. So there is no question of they closing down. That's an issue. But the question is about the print being held up as something which is actually helping us to reflect. I am afraid I disagree. Where you see the Ramnath Goenka's Indian Express, what is its status today? Every day, constantly trying to balance. If at all one story about Congress, then there will be 5 stories about the BJP, about the Prime Minister. And they look at the front page. They look at the kind of story that they did during the India-Pak war. That's something which you'd say that television, the newspapers today are also degrading. As they say, the editor, yes, but you can't be, there cannot be an editor who can stand up to the, because such editors are not appointed at all. There were times where the editor personal choice was whether I stand up to him or stand up to the management, or I don't, and I go along with it. But today, no editor is appointed who can stand up to the management. So that's the reality. So that's the reason. And how can we actually change the situation? Somebody she said, asked about what is the solution? Well, solution is, how do we, as Anant said, we need to strengthen the democratic struggles. Today, this is collapsing. 2014 is a landmark year, because you will see as he was saying, the Manmohan Singh government, people, all media could push back against Manmohan Singh government and could stand on its own. But here in BJP, you cannot just do this. If you do this, your empire will collapse. And that's the crucial difference. And that's the reason why, so long as we do not strengthen the democratic struggles, so long as we do not rip apart this authoritarian state, we will continue to face situation. And that's why we, the people of the country, have to stand up. As Anand said, at an individual level, a collective level, we need to stand up and challenge this authority, so that we throw them out in short run, in the days to come, if not very far ahead.
Let's start a revolution.
I think as somebody who has worked with one of the finest editors in India, Mr. N. Ram of the Hindu, and this discussion, in my view, will be complete. Aarti will agree if we don't talk about Bofor's. The Bofor's investigation carried out by the Hindu, and later, and the difference you can see, the later Mr. Ram brought out a series when I was with the Hindu, former associate editor, on Rafale. And one day I was sitting with a minister in Central Hall of Parliament. He asked me, how much Hindu sells? So I said, nearly 1.3 million. So why are we bothered about Rafale? This is not Bofor's era that government will fall. Then somebody pointed out, another journalist colleague in Central Hall, that how come these documents from the defense ministries are being given to Mr. N. Ram and Hindu is publishing it? And he said, no, we are not bothered. Who reads 1.3 million people in the English newspaper? We are more bothered about the regional and the Hindi media. No one has picked up that story. It's okay if there is something or other. We don't know. But so these are the 2 pieces of investigation which, we carried out in the Hindu. And apart from Bhagalpur blindings and the Jeep scandal, which
it's also very
Express
of the
Express was part of West End. Yeah, but later on,
yes,
this was, and CBI FIR contained only the Hindu reports. They were not able to make any headway, because I was covering the CBI, and when we saw all the letter rogatories, all the entire FIR was full of reports from the Hindu. So this was one point. But and even today, Aarti, Hindu has not got any ads from the BJP.
But
we still don't get.
Say something, and this is, although I have a lot of respect for the Hindu and Mr. N. Ram, it is really sad when Operation Sindoor was launched on the very first day, and their Home Ministry reporter, this young girl, she tweeted that some planes, Indian planes, were shot down, Yeah. On the first day of that raid, right? And she was made to delete those tweets by her management. by her management because the government came down like a ton of bricks. The Indian Air Force, I'm told, senior officials visited the Hindu office and threatened to bomb unless those streets were taken down. Well, bomb or whatever. I mean, they visited and they issued threats. And
also did online of Bathinda crash. It didn't appear in the next day.
no, but I'm just saying because the Hindu is otherwise such a sort of revered paper and everything, but they just buckled. They just buckled. It was very sad, and then later on, it's been found to be true because now everybody is confirming that we did lose planes on the first day. No. But
Yeah.
you had your not
Let's
how
have this
many,
young man
but the
say
fact
something.
that we lost.
Is Mike there?
And this poor girl has been taken off.
I just wanted to make a comment on the
Just
future of
introduce yourself.
future of print. Yes, my name is Jaskaran. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I believe the print is here to stay for mainly three reasons. Number one, that gentleman over there, I think he covered it, that people still trust print media, but the same amount of trust for digital media is missing. Second reason is censorship. It's far more easier to censor any digital form of content, but once it has been printed, it's very difficult to control its spread. For example, I think 2024 Feb issue of Caravan, there was a story on Kashmir violence, and I think it's still not available online. But now this brings me to my third point, that is ownership. Once I have that magazine, I have some form of ownership over it. So no government order banning that content can remove it from the physical copy which I have in my hands. So for these reasons, I think that print is here to stay and it's not going anywhere. Thank you so much.
While one subscribes completely to you saying that there must be collectivization and the struggle must go on. But I think the other worrying issue is that there has been a dumbing of the audience itself. And, the media now caters to the lowest common denominator, and it's the public is lapping that up. And when you say we're going to give what the public wants, it's a kind of a vicious cycle.
No, but that's part of a whole scheme of things that you trivialize everything, or you bring in pornography or
So there's a point there, so while you can look at the lowest common denominator, and if your goal is that I want to reach the lowest common denominator, that will be done by AI or somebody else or whichever technologies. But if you want to talk to an audience which is more discerning or has a certain thought process, that's where the importance of, content produced by a certain editorial process will always have value. Because, if your aspiration is to reach out everybody in the country, then you have no game to play, I feel. If your aspiration is to reach out to a certain select kind of audience, I think you can create a model for yourself to sustain. And I'm just picking at Jaskiran, right? Actually, he said a very fundamental point on which relates to the question of future of print in a physical format. The point of ownership is actually owning something cannot be undermined, because especially I'm talking from a magazine medium. A lot of our subscribers, I'm sorry, going into slightly tangential mode away from journalism to the slightly more commercial and the business side. A lot of our subscribers who start off as digital only subscribers in the second or third year shift to digital plus print, because the joy of owning something in keeping with it with yourself, and so that's related to your question. It's just something which cannot be explained with any rationality. It's just a human emotion that I want to own something, because digital is a virtual. At the end of the day, you can't own something which is digital. It can go away. Your website can be shut down. And that article, by the way, that he talked about, weirdly, that article is not available online, but anybody who bought the magazine can read the magazine. There is no restriction on circulating that article in the print format. So one these factors play in very weird, in a very unforeseen manner to sort of help you create a balance for whatever space that you're trying to create. And whilst we can sort of get away with what is, what the lowest common denominator of the audience wants. But I think if your goal is, that you want to talk to a certain audience which has a certain like sensibility, then I mean, there is a way to survive.
I just wanted to bring one point. I just wanted to bring a point to the panel. You see, there is so much manipulation of news. I mean, for instance, you have the Prime Minister in a mock kind of interview, and it's all manipulated. You see, the questions are discussed before what questions will be put, or they are not put at all, or you send an email, and that kind of thing. You see, and
Questions are given to the interviewers.
yeah,
Well, you have to
and
ask this
no, that is there, and then also that everything is laid out before what you will ask and what will be the reply, and I mean the whole thing is like a mock. So then and then there's no questioning. He doesn't address a press conference. I mean, so what I'm just trying to put across is that how do you get over this? I mean, we are. I mean, the media or the journalists are also participating in this, in creating this facade of kind of a question answer session, but it's all a farce.
You have an interviewer, Suhas, who is asking, "Aise khate hain ya waise khate?"
When an interviewer is no longer a journalist but a film star, then
The Prime Minister chooses to whom he talks.
No, but you see, that brings us to the whole concept of Godi media. You see, you have become lapdogs, So, and the lapdogs are ruling, you see, and the watchdogs have been put on the corner. So, I mean, where do you get out of this kind of syndrome? How do you get out of it? I mean, I'm putting it to you. Is this kind of, you see, within your editors guild, I'm sorry to tell you, within your editors guild, there are people who are doing this, and you can't do anything about them. You throw them out of your guild.
But Suhas,
No,
I don't think so we can do that.
Why can't you do it?
No.
No, but Suhas, I mean, honestly, this is a systemic problem. It is not limited to journalism alone. It is everywhere. It is across
that Indira Gandhi used to say
It
that
is across
corruption की बात मत करो, दुनिया में corruption है. You can't do that.
No, but you can't expect journalists to be divorced from the social reality. We reflect the social reality. We are part of it, and
but that doesn't answer anything.
No, obviously, we all have to work together to try to, sort of resolve this situation. But I'm just saying that, I think it is a bit unfair to expect that the media should rise above the reality that exists all around and expect. It cannot.
Well,
it cannot. You are a product. You are a product. No,
Give her
it
the
is
mic.
no longer a public service. Just like education is not. Just like health services are not. They are all commercialized.
Yeah, what is the point you're making?
So she's saying that I'm just saying I don't agree with Aarti where she says
it's not possible.
It's a system and that we don't rise above it.
You have to rise above.
That's what I'm saying.
To try.
Yeah,
But you have to try. But
all the more reason. Actually, all the more reasons.
I think it is a much deeper crisis. It's not just a crisis in the media. It is a much deeper crisis of our democracy. And this is across the world, actually. It's not just in India. It is across the world.
Can I ask you something?
People have to be just more vocal.
No,
about
can I
it
ask
because
one something?
yeah.
I mean, in this great surround of pessimism, are there any signs that this too shall pass?
I think so. I won't be very pessimistic, to be honest. And I think we have to brave it out. We have to brazen it out. And even though there are voices in journalism which might be called dubious, like the way there are voices in every field, I think the well-meaning have to just stand by, have to be more vocal, have to brave it out, and have to make their presence felt more. Because as Edmund Burke said, the only thing, or who was it? That the only thing for evil to triumph is for good people not to say anything.
No, what I feel is it is very important. I mean, there where the optimism comes in, that the people within the profession have to be shown the mirror That's not being done. No, I'm just saying, don't take it personal. But the mirror that you see, what you are not journalists. You have become brokers or manipulators or whatever you say, fixers. I mean, they're fixers. They're not journalists. They're fixers. Sorry.
I think every journalist in the room should stand up and say that's not true. Really?
No, that's not.
That's not the reality of the situation.
No. That's the point. What is
there in every newsroom? It's just being suppressed for the time being. That's the question I'm asking. Is that for the time being, or are these long-term signs of eternal slavery?
The decay is systemic, but I think we can't lose hope. We have to fight on, and I think we have to hope that we will survive long enough for try to change.
Okay, Suhas, can I come in here, please?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Let me do something which I hate doing, which is that I've been floating around in a fishbowl where there are only journalists, because I grew up in a household like that. And if you ask me, when I hear all of this pessimistic stuff about how every journalist has to be a crusader, every journalist has to be passionate, every journalist has to be some kind of warrior, I think this is nonsense. There are journalists who have never been so, and there are some who have been so. And it's a choice that journalists make. I think Anant started right, that there are ethical choices that some of us make for ourselves. And this is the reality. I have heard the word mercenary being used about journalists within the profession of print media some 60 years ago, and I'm 70 now. So for 60 years ago, the same debate in a different format, possibly with less intensity, because there were more people who were not mercenaries then, or who were still trying to fight a battle of journalism being a noble profession. But the reality is that not all journalists are cut out to be warriors. There are some who are going to be warriors, and if the breeding ground, which is the organization or the environment of journalism, as it were, begins to breed a few more, then it's good. Otherwise, if I'm looking at what is happening within the digital media platform, if you look at the YouTube channels, you look at the websites, you are finding that there is an explosion of good, not so good, and really deplorable journalism. And we have to keep working with the people who are producing the good and not so good, and and make sure that we are communicating through our choices that the deplorable is best. The deplorable should die a natural death in terms of support. I think that's the way to go.
Fine. I think we'll have to. You want to make a point? Yeah.
I just would like to say that whether it will pass, it will all depend on how we confront the situation. If we didn't look at the example of Turkey, look at the example of Poland, look at the example of Hungary, their people certainly did not fight at the first instance. And that's the reason why today, even at one point in Venezuela, what happened? That's a left-wing idealist state, but that's why how the entire media was squeezed and the judiciary was disarmed. And that's the reason, that's how an authoritarian setup came about. And that's what we see today in large parts of the Eastern Europe as well. So that's why India will become another Turkey if Modi and company are allowed to run through the system and our constitutional framework like this for another 5 or 7 years.
Can
And we had a situation that was bad. The media came out of it.
That's right.
Let us hope the same thing happens again.
No, but
The media came out
Ashish,
because the political system changed. Emergency was revoked, elections were held, there was a government change. And therefore, it helped the media to come out. So I think that's exactly the point that he's making.
Ashish,
The media cannot do it all on its own.
Ashish Nandi has just left, but he had a very valid point at a meeting here only a couple of weeks back, that the emergency of 75, 77 was a soft emergency. You see, what we are experiencing now is an undeclared emergency of a very vicious order. I mean, that's a point well taken. But anyway, we'll have to conclude this meeting. So, I mean, that is a given. I mean, all panelists tend to agree on that there is a existential crisis. I mean, due to declining trust, press freedom threats, economic instability, misinformation, and a digital ecosystem favoring sensationalism over substance. But I think we must be optimistic that this too shall pass, and journalism will come out of this media ecosystem, which is at the moment controlled by money bags. So the journalists will rise to the occasion. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.